What's going on, everybody? This is Jordan, and you're watching Degenerate Candlesticks. Now, last week I ended up taking off the training wheels, and I knew this week I had to be careful. After going over the trades from last week, I realized I needed to come up with a set plan for the rest of the year as well as next, which is why I've made it my goal by the end of 2024 to get my account balance up to $25,000. In order to do that, though, we're going to have to make some big moves and be very careful about it, which is why we will be using the OCO template for trade executions once again. Hopefully this will help me minimize my losses and secure profits. Also this week I will be implementing the Highlander Strategy.
There can be only one.
That's right, I will only be taking one trade, but we will use this trade as an in-depth look as to how I go about placing my trades. However, as I logged in and checked my balances, I noticed something. Looking at the positions page, the balances page, as well as the Thinkorswim platform itself, none of my balances were the same. It seems Schwab is still having difficulties transferring over some of its TD Ameritrade customers, as most of my balances just had an NA, and there was a notification at the top saying there was nothing to do at this point and the issue would soon be resolved. Well, I still needed to know what my balances were before I was going to start trading. I ended up having to give them a call to find out what my actual balance was before I could even start. But with that issue taken care of, I was able to start trading. Now when I start my day, it always starts the same at the scanners. I use 3 primary scanners, and they essentially all look for the same things in different quantities. I'm looking for a price range between $1 and $7. I'm looking for at least a 7% increase in the price to have already happened. I want there to have been at least 100,000 shares traded, and if possible, I don't want a lot of floating shares. Ideally, I'd like to find a stock that comes up on all 3 of these charts. So I start poring over these charts, looking for stocks with these qualities, and I started off with 10 stocks that caught my eye, but soon dwindled it down to 4. Those 4 were CDIO at $1.30, FSR at $2.65, IBRX at $4.15, and LGMK at $2.15. Now there were other stocks that were catching my eye. However, they were either too expensive on a 5-minute chart, or they just weren't moving in a way that I liked. Once I find a stock that I'm interested in, I start analyzing the charts. I'm using Bollinger Bands, MACD, and volume of shares traded as my indicators. I also look at level 2 and reference the high a day often, as my entry point is the first candle to break the high a day. You will also notice as I look at the charts, I use my cursor to determine points of support and resistance instead of drawing lines on the chart. Sometimes I find drawings useful, but other times there's just too many and my charts become overwhelming. IBRX had a special spot in my heart, but at $4.15 it was just too expensive, and it was the first in my watch list to get cut. CDIO was looking really good, and I kept coming back to the chart throughout my scans. I even initially placed a trade for 500 shares. However, it didn't have the momentum I was looking for, and I ended up canceling out. It's at this point I'd like to mention that if it's possible to have a dual monitor setup, I would highly recommend it. That way, instead of having your screen look like this, it can look like this. Personally, I like to have my second monitor look something like this. Glorious. Because when you have one screen and you're stuck looking at the scanners, you'll have moments where you miss out on great opportunities. Just like I did with FSR. It had 13 green bars of upward momentum. What the f***? That would have been fun to trade. But that's life. It's at this point I take a second look at CDIO. It didn't have the momentum I was looking for earlier, but maybe now it does. Looking at the MACD, the volume does seem to be increasing and might possibly break out over the signal line. The candlestick looks like it might hit the lowest Bollinger Band, indicating a potential buy zone. However, it's still too far away from my entry point based on the levels of support and resistance. I'm looking at somewhere around $1.40. Maybe on the third time around, it'll look better. LGMK, however, was looking good. It just didn't seem to have a lot of action at the moment, so I ended up passing on the opportunity altogether. It was at this moment I ended up implementing my Highlander strategy, and placing my first trade with CDIO at 1,000 shares. I ended up filling at roughly $1.40 per share and holding for almost a minute, and selling at $1.48, bringing in $79.20 of profit. And while $80 a minute sounds great, if I want to add $23,000 to my account by the end of 2024, I need to be bringing in roughly $150 per trade. So that's only half of my goal. But that's alright, we have to start somewhere. But how would I rate my trade of CDIO? I initially misread the entry point for CDIO, so there's room for improvement there. And while I held the position, there was potential to take more profit, so my exit could have been a little cleaner too. Overall, I give myself 3 out of 5 stars. But that wraps up this week's trades. And as always, if you're enjoying the content, hit that like or subscribe button, as it really helps the channel and I'd appreciate it. Talk to you guys next week. Have a good one.